I'm a native to this land. Grew up on the same ground where my fathers took their stand. I'm a native to this land. I'm a native to your hands. I was made to rest inside them when I've labored all I can. I'm a native to your hands. And I am with you now, finally. I am with you now, finally. I am with you now, and I will always be.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Robert Mondavi Winery here in Oakville, California. We are sitting at the edge of the Tokelon Vineyard, right here in the Napa Valley. And we're here to celebrate the release of the Robert Mondavi Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve 2008, a very special wine, one that is near and dear to our hearts. My name is Carl Yeager, and I'm the estate director here at Robert Mondavi Winery, and it's our pleasure to talk to you about the wine this evening. With me tonight, I have two very special guests that are such an integral part of making Robert Mondavi Winery what it is. With us tonight, we have Margaret Mondavi, our Vice President of Cultural Affairs. Very happy to have you here tonight, Margaret.
Nice to be here, Carl. Yes.
And our Director of Winemaking, Geneviève Janssens, who has been with us since 1978. Great to have you here tonight, Geneviève.
Wonderful to be here.
I've been here since '67.
You have. You've been here since 1967, but the winery was built in 1966, and then you were one of the first employees to come on board and help Robert realize his vision. And I know he chose the Tokelon Vineyard, which is right behind us, as the place to put his winery. Why did Robert choose Tokelon Vineyard? If you could tell me a little bit about that as the place to build his winery, and what was special about this vineyard that he selected this place to build our winery.
Carl is a very smart man, and then also he knew a lot about Napa Valley. He knew about the soil, he knew about the terroir, and he always felt that Tokelon really was, it was sort of the heart of it. It was very important to, especially for Cabernet Sauvignon, great place to grow it, as the result tells, doesn't it?
Yes.
Well,
it does, and we're going to talk a lot about that. I think we actually have a picture of Mr. Mondavi, if we could show the folks at home in our audience that picture of Mr. Mondavi. And Margaret, you have always told me that Robert's spirit is in every glass. What does that mean to you and to us
well,
here at the winery?
First we got to put the wine in the glass. Then it's in the spirit. Because he was so, you know, his soul was wine, and he felt that wine was also, it was ecumenical. It wasn't necessarily our wine alone. It was the wines of the whole world that he celebrated. And he felt that wine brought people together, that, you know, what we call the joie de vivre, that you had a good moment. And as memories go in my long life, really, some very fine moments are spent around the table with good friends, family, good glass of wine, good food. You know, you don't forget.
No, you don't. It really is about sharing.
Sharing,
you know,
right.
It's a great thing. You know, you often remind me that Mr. Mondavi always said that he was striving for perfection, and perfection was barely good enough. What did you, when you tell me that, what do you mean by that?
Well, he always strived for the best, you know. As a matter of fact, it's almost a funny thing that when he gave you a compliment and he said something was really good, he said, but, you know. Sometimes he didn't hit so well. He said, but I tried my best, but, you know, you could do better. It was, but he has such a great spirit, and, you know, it wasn't only a quest of perfection, but it was also great generosity and sharing, as you said. Yes.
Yeah, he really, I think for all of us that work here, when you, no matter what department you're in, whether you're in the vineyard or you're in the cellar or up in the office, you get that sense of always expecting us to do better, always looking forward, always trying to think, well, we've made good wine this year, but what are we going to do next year? What have we learned that we can then bring back to our process and really make even better wine the next year? And you just feel it from everyone that works here. You
And
just get that
his
sense.
connection with everybody. Did you know that every Tuesday morning he went down to the Buttercream Bakery and schlepped 2 big boxes of donuts and brought them to everybody in the cellar? You know, it was just that again. He wanted the sense to communicate, and to share, and the generosity.
I remember when we go back to this question of why Bob built the winery here at Tokelon, you once told me a story about a 1961 bottle of Margaux.
Well, I remember him at a tasting, and he was really deliberately tasting and going back to it and smelling it, and then he said, you know, this is the kind of wine I want to make. And I think he certainly achieved his goal. Yes.
And it's amazing how he knew that one day he could make that wine at Tokelon.
Yes.
Tokelon hadn't fully proven itself yet, but now, you know, when you look at the results, he was absolutely right about the vineyard here being able to achieve that.
And Tokelon means so much, you know, in Greek it means the highest beauty. And look out there. It is, isn't it?
Yeah, I think for those of you at home that can see the vineyard behind us, dusk is one of my favorite times of the day here in the valley, and certainly at Tokelon, it is one of the most beautiful times of the day to be here, and it's beautiful. I think we're going to get rewarded with a beautiful sunset tonight. It does mean the most beautiful, and you not only get that sense, no matter what time of the day you're here, you get that sense that it's not only a place that makes great wine, a vineyard that makes great wine, but it is one of those beautiful places.
Do you think it will be the sunset reflect somehow Genevieve's blouse?
I think, yeah, we will get that beautiful pink across the sky hopefully tonight.
I think so.
I think so.
Yes.
So Geneviève Janssens has been with us since 1978. And when you think about the longevity of experience, a winemaker really has to have a relationship with her winery and with her vineyards. And when you think we have 33 years of experience of Geneviève and her relationship with the Tokelon vineyard, and when you think about difficult vintages or vintages that are not long and warm and sunny and you have to make really hard and fast decisions about how are you going to react to what's happening outside so that every single year you wind up with a great wine. Here at Robert Mondavi Winery, we have Geneviève's 33 years of experience, and on her team is Rich Arnold, our senior white winemaker, who's been with us since 1975. So if I'm doing math in my head, that's about 35, 36 years. And our senior red winemaker, Gustavo Gonzalez, who's been with us about 18 years. So when you add all that up, it's about 85, 86 years of winemaking experience that we have here at Robert Mondavi Winery. And you think about the experience, Geneviève, that you have brought to our winery. And I know that you came in 1978 and you were drawn in by Mr. Mondavi's vision of where he was going. Tell us about what brought you here back then.
Mainly, Mr. Mondavi in Europe was very known, and everybody was talking about his winery. It was a brand new winery, and his expertise and his innovation. And we were talking about stainless steel tank that he put in his winery, but in not a small quantity, in a big, large quantity. And talking about the barrels he was using for his white wines, red wines, even if in small area of France it was common, it was not common at that level of production. So he brought some rotor tanks, which at that time was absolutely not known in Europe. And so I was coming to visit the winery and to be sure that I could bring back at home all the things that Mr. Mondavi was innovating here, because his inspiration was from France, but he was bringing them here, which was making in France something extraordinary. That was quite an event, and quite a moment in the life of the winemaking world in Europe.
So it's amazing to me how Mr. Mondavi had visited France, tasted the great first growth chateau, was inspired knowing that he could make a wine like that here in the Napa Valley. And as you've said, Margaret, we have the soil, the climate, the knowledge, the know-how. Why shouldn't we do that? And yet he comes back here, and it's all the innovation to achieve those goals that finds its way back to France and to you.
But it put them all together in one winery, because to be able to see all of that in Europe, you need to go in Bordeaux, in Burgundy, in Italy, in Germany. He brought everything here in this winery, and that was wonderful for me as a young winemaker.
And you remember, Geneviève, at that time, every winemaker of the world came to visit
Absolutely.
us because of that combination. It
Yes,
was a
everybody was
wonderful
stopping by here.
time, inspiring, exciting, and altogether a new thing has been created, by Robert Mondavi.
We will talk in a little while about how that innovation is still alive in your cellar and in your vineyards today. But first, Mr. Mondavi always said that he wanted to make wines that stand in the company of the world's finest. It was those trips to Europe that gave him the inspiration to work hard here. And he asked his neighbors here in the Napa Valley and in California to do very much the same. And they followed him. And I do remember one of our good friends, Mr. Meldick, was reminding me about a tasting in 1972 that the LA Times, critic Mr. Balzer from the LA Times, did a tasting of Cabernets in 1972. Would either of you like to tell me about that tasting and how that changed the face of California Cabernet?
Well, I would think it had really a great influence. As you know, as Mr. Dick said today, that we had 33 Cabernets tasted. Can you imagine that was the total number that participated today? How many would there be? Think of it.
Hundreds.
Hundreds. So from those 33 tasted by great judges, Robert Mondavi came out as number one. And this was, of course, as again, I think Mel said, suddenly it was discovered in his best places, the best restaurants, be it in New York, be it in Florida. I mean, they started to ask for the wine because it was now a known fact that an extraordinary wine would come out of Napa Valley, and it was the Robert Mondavi Cabernet Sauvignon. May I come back? I was just a little tour guide mouse type here, but we were selling wine, and it was only one bottle per customer after that came out. Do you know that the line went around the corner, way down to Walnut Street, of these ones that came in to buy a bottle of wine? And I kind of watched it, and I saw the same faces come around again because they went right back to the end. And what was the wine? $6.90? $7.50? I don't know.
I think it was about that price.
Yes, can you imagine? Yes.
Absolutely wonderful. So, Geneviève, for the To Kalon vineyard, you have often talked to me about it being one of the first growth vineyards of the world. What is it that you mean by that? We know it's one of the best places in the world to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. There are many great places to grow Cabernet Sauvignon. Why do you refer to it as one of the first growths?
Because I thought a lot about what is the definition of first growth. And in fact, the first growth can be in France, can be anywhere in Europe. It's a vineyard which will always season with the weather and will always create wonderful wine no matter the weather. And so I think I have spent so many years in vintages in To Kalon, and I'm always able to create beautiful Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve and beautiful wines. So that's how I decided that it is the first growth, because definitely we always go back to that definition of great wine. And my best example is 2011. 2011 is a difficult vintage. It's not easy, and we have started with the cool weather, with a lot of fog. We were always waiting for that few days of wonderful sunny days. They never really came. They came 3 days and then fog, 3 days. So the weather was bouncing back and forth all the time and not very stable. So the winemakers were working in a lot in the vineyard. And now we have finished harvest in 2 days, and I am tasting the wine every day. It's a fantastic vintage. It's absolutely gorgeous. I know exactly which one will be our reserve, which one will be our Oakville. The star is there in the glass already. So that's why I'm very sure that it is a further growth.
And I think that's an important point. And I know sometimes you don't like it when I talk about the critics, but if we think back to 1972, the critics kind of helped the world understand what Bob was achieving. And now if you think about Genevieve's concept of first growth, since the 1971 vintage through to the 2008, there have only been 1 or 2 vintages that have received a score lower than 90 points in almost 4 decades of making that wine. And we'll talk in a little bit about the renovation of the cellar and what the critics are saying about our wines now. But To Kalon, as that first growth here in Oakville, what are the 1 or 2 things that make it such a special place to grow Cabernet? What are the different aspects that make this such a great place to grow Cabernet?
I think this is the location. We are located in the middle of the Napa Valley in Oakville, that is Oakville appellation, and close to the Mayacamas Mountains, so close to the west of the Napa Valley. And the Mayacamas Mountain for millions of years have been eroded by the water. And we have a slope around 9%. And from the bottom of the Mayacamas Mountain, you have the rocky clay profile of soil, and then slowly we go toward the Napa River, and then in the middle we have the sand, and then closer to the river we have the clay. And all our best blocks are located on the 9% slope, the bottom of the Mayacamas Mountains. And that's where we grow our best Cabernet Franc, Petit Verdot. We have a little bit of Merlot and Malbec, and we have, of course, a lot of Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's why this is such a special location. The Napa Valley climate is Mediterranean, but with an influence of the ocean. So we are lucky to have the fog in the evening, so it's very cold, and the mornings the sun is beautiful, and the temperature is gorgeous.
So, and I know there are so many different soil types, and I also know that you've often talked about how it gets so cool or cold at night that the fog comes in, and then we also get the shade from these Mayacamas Mountains here behind us. That cooling at night and the warmth during the day is one of the things that gives us that great Cabernet, that ripening.
Yes.
Isn't that something that Bob always said, that a wine should have perfect balance?
Yes.
With the heat of the day and the cool of the night, that you have the acid.
And definitely we have that. So we are lucky.
So before we go to questions from the web, which we're going to take questions from folks around the globe that are watching, I do want to just very quickly talk about the innovation that you and Mr. Mondavi put into the To Kalon cellar. I think it is so rare in the history of winemaking to say that you've gotten this far in life and say that you want to completely re-engineer the way you make your wine. And in the year 2000, Mr. Mondavi and Geneviève, our director of winemaking, decided to do just that. And it's my understanding that it was just a complete reimagination of the red winemaking process here. And it's so rare that you have the opportunity to recreate your winery to make wine off of one principal vineyard, To Kalon, which is the backbone of our Cabernet program. And so tell me, what was behind the reason as to why you reinvented To Kalon?
I think it was the continuation of always improving the wine and the desire of Mr. Mondavi to always be excellent. And in 1989, we were devastated by the phylloxera. And To Kalon was completely replanted at 80% of the vineyard. So it was a big expense, but in the same time, because of that, we were able to rediscover the To Kalon. So we just understood that because we selected the right vineyard for the right rootstock, the right clones, we did not replant some varieties, and we thought was not appropriate. So all the Pinot Noir, all the Chardonnay went south to Napa Valley in the Carneros region, and then we knew then the Cabernet Sauvignon and the Bordeaux Reds were excellent here, and the Sauvignon Blanc and the Semillon. So that's how we rearranged the the Tokalan vineyards. But then 10 years later, the fruit was beautiful, the profile of the tannins were spectacular and are still spectacular. So we needed a tool and to polish the wine, to prepare the wine to aging graciously and then be in the bottle at the utmost quality of the wine. So that's why Mr. Mondavi thought about the oak tanks, and he said, let's do it. And as usual, it's not small, it's big. So 56 oak tanks in one winery is not known in the world, and it was Mr. Mondavi's ideas just to do that. Let's do it, and we did it.
Wasn't it also that he came away from the stainless steel because he felt the oak tank had a certain softness and again, the balance.
Yes, absolutely, giving a roundness and softness.
Fantastic,
and he was always
investment, wasn't it?
Yes.
So one of the biggest differences between the old cellar then and the new was moving from stainless steel to these big oak fermenters. They were made by Taranceau in France, coopered there, brought over, assembled here right in the winery, and then the entire winery was built in sort of a gravity flow, so that you could treat the wine very gently. And I think we actually have a picture of the 5,000-gallon oak barrels, the Tokalan cellar. If we could show the folks at home that cellar. And the idea that you could put that much detail into how we make the wine is really incredible. Now, after the wine leaves the Tokalan cellar, and then gravity flow downstairs to the first-year barrel room where it rests in oak for approximately 18 months.
Yes.
Why do we use new oak for about 18 months? I think our viewers would like to know, what does that lend to the wine?
The Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve is 100% new French oak because all the vineyards which is in these bottles have so strong tannin, then 100 new French oak is totally perfect. We don't want an oak overwhelming the wine. But if we have very good structure and good body, we can do it. And that's in the Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve, that's what we are doing. On other blend like the Oakville Cabernet Sauvignon, we have like 75% of new French oak because we are looking for something else in the style of the Oakville appellation Cabernet Sauvignon. So if we want a little bit more gentleness or something, we don't want to overwhelm one block. But the Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve have so strong vineyards in the blend, and we can do 100%.
So it's that fruit intensity that allows us to use new oak with the wine.
Yes, absolutely.
I think we actually have a picture of the first-year barrel room to show you. If we could bring that up for the audience at home. It's just beautiful the way it's laid out with all the beautiful barrels, stained so beautifully every harvest with the red wine. So once it's rested in oak, we then go to our, taste the blend, taste the different barrels, and tell me just very quickly about the blending process. What is that process like?
It's a very long process. We start at harvest time, and every day to now we are testing every single tank. So every single vineyard is fermented in one tank, and we keep track of all the flavors, the taste, the profile of the wine, the potential of the wine, and we are working according to what we are testing and seeing in the tank. Then, when the wine has finished fermentation, it stays on maceration, and then it goes into barrels for malolactic fermentation and aging, and then bottled 18 months later. And then during that time, we are blending from January until bottling constantly. We don't finalize a blend until bottling.
So you're also tasting wine from different tanks, different barrels. And it's my understanding that on any given vintage, you work with between 7 to 9 different coopers. Yes. Why do you work with all of those different coopers? Why not just choose one that you like the most?
To bring complexity in the oak and complexity into the glass and the wine. And every cooper will have a sort of craftsmanship, which will bring us something different and beautiful. And every cooper has a different location in France because they are all French oak. And they will bring their savoir-faire, and that will enhance our wines. And of course, we take our coopers as partner, and we like to invite them every January, February, so they can test their wines of the past and the future new vintage. And we talk about ordering barrels, and they are truly partners with us, and that's very important, and it's coming from Mr. Mondavi's vision.
So it's my understanding that Mr. Mondavi went actually to France and met with the coopers and was one of the first winemakers to actually go back into the process where it started in the forests, talk to the coopers and say, here's how I want you to toast and make your barrels. And it's great that you continue those relationships today. Now I know the producers are telling me we have to take some questions from the web before we taste the wine. So let's do that. I'm going to see who is writing in some questions. We have a question from Kelsey in Napa about how the 2008 vintage compares to the 2007. That's a great question because we have tonight for our studio audience and for some of you at home and up here on the stage, we're going to taste those two vintages. And I know that there are some vast differences between those vintages. So let's see if we can answer Kelsey's question.
Sure. So before we describe the wine, we always have to think about the weather and how we have been influenced in our decision by the weather. And 2008 was a continuity of a drought, so not a lot of rain during the winter time, but we had very difficult spring. We had many nights of cold night. In April, and then we have a lot of changes, a little bit unstable weather during the springtime, and then suddenly in August, September, October, very mild temperature. To compare with the 2007 weather, it was the first year of the drought, 50% less rain during the winter time, then no rain at all during the springtime, but a little bit mild weather in the summertime. So it's almost comparable, but because of those difficult springtime in 2008, we don't have exactly the same vintage. So in 2007, you are going to test a lot of structured tannin power, and in 2008, a lot of refinement and a lot of very delicate flavors, and will make it so special and very much in the definition of what Mr. Mondavi liked to say. And I love when you are saying, when Mr. Mondavi was saying he liked his wine to be as soft
as a baby's bottom, but with the power of a Pavarotti. And I also would like to come back because the discussion about cooperage, which obviously is so important and has given our wine so much special character, but Bob also always insisted on balance. And you know that with the balance, that it would have the fruit, that it would have the acid, that it would have not overpowered by one or the other.
He wanted harmony.
He wanted the harmony,
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, which is very special.
That's great. Well, so before we taste the wine, I think we're going to take some questions from the audience. So I know we have someone ready with a microphone in case some folks in the audience have some questions for us. So if you do have a question, raise your hand. And Vida Harris will bring you the microphone, and we will see if we can answer your questions.
I think the thing I'd always like to know is, we always talk about food and pairing with wine and how that enhances it. But for me, when you drink this wine at home, what is your favorite meal to prepare with it?
And who are you asking?
Miss Mondavi.
What is
your favorite meal to pair with our Reserve Cabernet Sauvignon? Can you even choose a favorite, Margaret, or?
Well, it depends on the day and what I have and what's on the market and all that. But I would think for a beautiful Cabernet Sauvignon, you would, of this great style, you would certainly go towards, I would think, I don't know, a wonderful leg of lamb, yes, and just with the accoutrements, maybe now some fall vegetables with it, and I think that would be a nice combination. But there are other things, believe me. It goes also good with some cheese if you want to be just on the simple side, And what about a squab?
Squab would be delicious.
Would that be good?
Yeah. Oh yeah, excellent.
Yes.
And here in the vineyard room where we're speaking to you from, lamb is often on the menu when we're serving the Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve. Our chef, Jeff Mosier, makes great lamb and great ribeye with our Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve. Wonderful things here at the vineyard. So come and join us in the vineyard room for a dinner one evening. When? Should we invite the world in for next week, Margaret? It'd be great.
And your question also brings that you obviously open the bottle a little before your dinner. So if you have 2 or 3 tablespoons to add to the reduction of the sauce, you know. You then have this nice combination of bringing the wine in so easily. It's perfect harmony again, you know.
Absolutely.
And then you have to also have the right person to have it with, right?
You have to have the right person to have it with.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
the mood is important, right?
Well, and what do you always tell me about what happens when you uncork a bottle of wine? What do we lose?
Boredom.
That's right. The only thing we lose is boredom. Do we have another question from the audience that we can answer for somebody tonight? Because we have a few more on the web, but want to see if we have any more questions in the audience.
I'm wondering if the winery is open to visit during harvest, and if so, what kinds of things can you do?
I think I'll take that one. The winery is definitely open all year long, but we love to have guests, especially at harvest. You can come to the winery and do many great things. This is a winery where we believe in the joy of the visit, we believe in the joy of the meal, and we really believe in education. Mr. Mondavi went around the world educating people about what fine California wine could be, and we continue that mission here. We have a great team of educators who take on that mission. So you can come for a tour, you can come for a tour and tasting, you can come and have a great Harvest of Joy lunch here in the vineyard room.
You can see an art show.
You can see the art show on the walls.
Yeah.
You can come and have a tasting in our appellation room, or all of our reserve wines are open for tasting in our aptly named To Kalon room here at the winery. So we would love to see you. If you're here in July, we would love to see you for our concert series, which has been running for our 44th season. Coming up this next year, if I've got my math.
No, you're
right.
jumping one, 43rd.
Jumping one, 43rd. Thank you, Margaret.
We love to think.
I'm getting
that
ahead of
we're
us.
also the 44th,
Our
yeah.
43rd season starting this year, so there's lots to do when you come and visit us. We're located in Oakville, and of course you can find it right here by going to robertmondaviwinery.com.
Closed on Christmas Day.
Are we closed on Christmas
New Year's
Day?
Day?
And New Year's Day.
And Thanksgiving?
Thanksgiving.
Yes.
That's great.
Yes.
So we do have to close down and enjoy our wines once in a while. Is that it? Excellent. So now we're going to take a few more questions from the web and then taste the wine. So we have a question from Elizabeth in San Jose, California. It's a great question because we didn't cover it at all. So Elizabeth asks, what grape varietals are grown in the To Kalon vineyard? And we talked about Cabernet. We did not talk about the other Bordeaux varieties, red and white, that we grow here.
Yes, we are in the time of replanting. So again, we have the chance to select the varieties which will be excellent for our wines. So we have the Cabernet Sauvignon, and with the Cabernet Sauvignon, we always like to put Cabernet Franc, and usually 8 to 10%. Almost every vintages, and we have Petit Verdot. So we have around 3 to 5% of Petit Verdot planted in To Kalon, and then a little bit of Merlot and Malbec. And what we are doing, we are more and more. We are getting very mature in who we are, our identity in the Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve. And the Merlot and the Malbec, we like to put it in the Oakville appellation because it gives a lot of suppleness and it's very delicious and very delicate. And we think it's more appropriate for Oakville, our Oakville Cabernet Sauvignon. And for the Reserve, we want big, sturdy, strong tannin. So the Petit Verdot and the Cabernet Franc is wonderful.
It's my understanding that we have an ongoing replanting program here in To Kalon, that it's that care of the right varieties, the right clones on the right soils. You're always digging holes to find what's the soil type in this block of the vineyard. As my understanding that we have been planting Cabernet Franc, some that's now coming online.
Yes, and it's beautiful. And we are the stewards of that vineyard, and we want in 10 years and 20 years to be sure then the other winemakers will have the same tools as us. So that's why we are replanting now and thinking about the future.
So when we planted the Cabernet Franc, how many years does it take before you use it in wine? And then how many more years until you feel like you can use it in reserve?
But for the Cabernet Franc, the first vintages will go in our Napa Valley. And then after that, for good 10 years, we don't know. The Cabernet Franc has to take his decision and where to go. But usually if it is a very good vineyard of the past, we know that if we replant the Cabernet Franc, it will be great. And to be eligible in the Cabernet Sauvignon Reserve, that vineyard needs to be 15 years old and
15
plus.
years old.
Yes.
So think about that, the idea that you have to make a decision 15 to 20 years prior
Yeah.
as to what's going to wind up in your glass this evening. And I think when you think about the meticulous planning that takes place, and you think about how here in the United States, that concept of innovation and what we do well and hard work that Mr. Mondavi left us with winds up in your glass, that the decision-making period is that long. And I think that just shows you what American ingenuity is all about.
Yes, and we cannot forget the Sauvignon Blanc and the Semillon. We are doing our Fumé Blanc Reserve, which is a blend, an estate blend coming from To Kalon. And we have a beautiful small Sauvignon Blanc bottling named I Block. So we have beautiful Sauvignon Blanc. So Oakville and To Kalon is really good for the border varieties, white and red.
White and red.
Yes.
So we have another question from Laurel, who we hit on this before.
Why do you only have questions from ladies?
I think it's great that they're so inquisitive about they're smart. It's because they're smart, Margaret. So Laurel wants to know, what were some of your biggest challenges in the 2011 harvest? I know you spoke about some of them, but if you could focus on what was the one biggest challenge that you had in this year's harvest? I know there were times when you guys were spending late nights on into the vineyards as to working with them, what to do. What was your biggest challenge this year?
The biggest challenge was the instability of the weather. So we couldn't predict from one day to another if the weather will be nice or not nice. It was impossible. So each time, because when we predict the date of harvest, we see the vineyard, we watch the weather report and forecast, and we plan in advance. It was impossible. So from one vineyard, we say, okay, this vineyard is going to be ready in 10 days, or in a week, or 3 days, and then we had to pick up the next day, because it was just changing the profile, and we were concerned about harming the fruit. So it was a very complex vintage to plan in advance. So it was, the vineyard manager needed to be ready anytime. And we were not whimsical, the weather was whimsical. That was the hard one to follow, the weather.
I remember coming in the morning this year, there's like in our iBlock conference room, there's like a war room where all the winemakers and vineyard managers come in very early every morning, and you'll see them huddled around their picking schedules row by row on the computer and just making this decision every day about what was being picked the next day. And I think this year you seem more frenetic than I've ever seen you.
The logistic was changing quite a lot just because of that, and we needed to be really, really on the tippy toes. I must have walked the same vineyard 5 times in 3 days, sometimes 2 times in a day. And I never did that. This is just this vintage, 2011. Pretty unique, but the result is pretty beautiful, so I cannot complain too much.
That's right. So we only have time for 1 or 2 more questions from the web, and then we're gonna taste the 2008 and the 2007. So we have a question from Ravi in Orlando, Florida. How did Robert Mondavi end up in California, and where did he come from? Margaret, I think that one is for you.
Well, you know, Robert Mondavi was born in Ely, Minnesota, and the family came to California in 1923. The father was an Italian immigrant, and you know, at that time, I guess there was work in these iron mines, so that's what he meant. But he was a very intelligent man, and he was also had still some background in grapes and so forth from Le Marche, where he came from. And so that little Italian community, I don't know why Italians moved up to Minnesota, but that's where they were. He came every year and picked grapes that would then be shipped back to Ely and Virginia, and these the people would make wine at home. This was especially very important during Prohibition, because if you remember that there was a sort of a little law quirk where you could make homemade wine, I think 200 gallons per family.
Yes.
And so, of course, it was very important. But when he traveled to California, he realized where the best grapes came from. And he always said, cannot beat those great grapes from Napa Valley. And so in 1923, he brought the family to Lodi. He did then really commercially ship grapes and other fruits to cities in the East, from Chicago and Washington and Boston and so forth.
Well, and if we think about it, and you think about Bob's childhood and his work with his father Cesare, the idea that he went up and down varying vineyard areas of California to buy grapes to send them back east to the families for home winemaking, that was probably the start of how he got to know where the best vineyards were.
Exactly. And he, thought about it and said, this is where it is. So then the boys, there was Peter and there was Bob, and they grew up in Lodi, went there to high school, worked very hard, made wooden boxes for the grapes, which were then, all the food was shipped in wooden boxes. And Bob was the champion. He one day was able to nail together 2,000 boxes. They made $0.015 per box. And actually it was through this work that then they had enough money to go to college. So both Robert and Peter went to Stanford, and Bob later on took some enology classes at University of California, Berkeley. There was no Davis at the time, and of course very intensely learned winemaking through many masters too, like Andrew Chef and Martinez and so forth, people from Napa Valley, and established his own little in the garage. He had a lab, I don't know it was, but he was already, with this great intensity of making the best. And then in 1943, the family bought the Charles Krug Winery.
Yes, they did.
And it, of course, kind of opened things in a bigger scale.
Yeah, and I think it was at that time that Mr. Mondavi, after being at Charles Krug, then had taken his trips to Europe and realized that great wines could be made, and that's when he set off here then in the 1960s for Robert Mondavi Winery. We're going to take one last question. So there's a question from Beijing where someone's asking where can they get our wines there. And I would say go on to robertmondaviwinery.com and you can see our list of distributors there around the world. And our wines are sold all over the world. I think Bob first went to China in the 70s or 80s?
80s.
In the 80s.
In the 80s, yes. And we have now established an office in Beijing.
Yes, we do.
China is, we have, the people are starting to be able to afford the wine, and so it's going to be a whole new relationship, And we have so many people that come from China and from Asia now to visit us.
People from all over the world come visit us here at the winery.
Amazing. Yeah.
So we're going to taste the wines now, and we'll do that. And Geneviève is going to lead us into tasting and tell us a little bit about, we talked about the difference between the vintage before, and then maybe we can now focus on the wine. Why do we taste wine side by side? Here at Robert Mondavi Winery, we love to educate. And you've often had that experience where you have a bottle of wine one week, and then you think you loved it, and then the following week you taste another wine, and well, you liked it too, and then did you remember which one you liked, or what did you learn from that? When you have our wines, or wines from our neighbors, instead of buying, if you're having friends over, instead of buying 2 bottles of the same wine, buy 2 different wines. Try them with your meal side by side. Have a half glass of each to start, and you'll see what you like, because it's all about what you like to drink. Mr. Mondavi always said, drink what you like and like what you drink. And when you taste wine side by side, you have that chance to learn the compare, contrast. And because the 2007 vintage was considered one of the hallowed vintages of the last 4 decades, and yet we love our 2008, and we did this to show you how even in a difficult vintage, we can make a wine that stands up to one of the best vintages. So instead of comparing to French wines, to First Growth Bordeaux tonight, we decided to compare ourselves to ourselves. And so, Geneviève, I think you're going to start us off with the 2008.
Yes, I'm going to test and try to give a little bit what is the soul of the wine. And so, first of all, it's very fragrant right away. When you smell the wine, it's very engaging, and that's very important for us. And you feel how important the coopers and the wood is, because it's a lot of finesse and elegance in the wood already. So by smelling the wine, you are already set in the style of our wines, and elegance and finesse, definitely. So then you have a lot of fruit, and it's a young wine. 2008, drinking now is very young for me. but you can discern that it's going to be all together in a year, 2 years, 3 years. So you have the wood, you have the fruit, you have the tannin, but in a few years, everything will be completely melodious. So at the present time, it's you can smell different things. Then when you have it on the palate, sorry, it's so special.
So special. Cheers.
Cheers, yes.
Cheers.
You feel right away
Margaret.
the refinement of the tannin. So this vintage
Cheers.
is an incredible vintage for me of elegance and style, very stylish.
Finesse.
Yes, and finesse, yes, and harmonious.
Yes,
If this is
very
what
good.
Mr. Mondavi
Yeah,
always wanted, and we are continuing that by focusing and doing that balance of the wine. So this is a 2008, and then when you go to the 2007, this is very different. First of all, it's a year older, so the nose will be much more in harmony together with the fruit, with the oak, with everything, and. You smell darker fruit. This is what the 2008 might be a little bit on the redder fruit, and this is very dark, black, very deep dark. And then when you taste it, you have the structure, the tannin, the volume right there. It's powerful. So you have a vintage of elegance and a vintage of power. So that's how I will describe the 2007 and the 2008. So depending who you are with friends, what is your situation the night you are going to open that bottle, the mood of the group, the food, you might enjoy both because they are absolutely spectacular, both of them.
So I think
different profile.
You get to choose whether you want a night of elegance or a night of power, or maybe both in the same night.
Yeah,
which is great.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, that's great. I like to compare both.
Well, Geneviève, I would like to have a toast to you and to Margaret. I don't know, many of you out there may know that Geneviève Janssens was named Wine Enthusiast Winemaker of the Year this year. Only the second time in the history of that award that a woman has been named Winemaker of the Year. And, you know, it is both of you that keeps us on our toes, that keeps us looking forward, that demands hard work from us, because I know you do it yourselves. And we would all like to toast to the both of you for doing that for us and for making these great wines for the world to enjoy.
May I also say, Carl, that, you know, Bob used to say, if you like your work, you don't have to have a job for the rest of your life. You don't have to work anymore. You just enjoy it.
Exactly.
And so joy is part of it, isn't it?
I think that passion that Bob had is in everyone here, and I think we all have that joy. So we come to work and it's not like work at all.
No.
So cheers to everyone.
Cheers, Margaret.
And have a good evening, and thank you so much for joining us.
Cheers to all of you.